Hello and welcome back to GMAX Studios. Over the past few episodes, we have seen what aperture, shutter speed and ISO is. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the relationship between these three things. But before we do that, if you haven't seen the previous episodes, take a look at them by clicking here, and watch them and come back. It'll take about 10 minutes. So before we try and understand the relationship between ISO, shutter speed and aperture, let us try and understand what a stop means. A stop in camera language means that you're either doubling or halving the amount of light hitting the sensor or coming into the camera.
What you see here is a full stop aperture scale. Between each of these apertures, the amount of light doubles if we move from a smaller to a larger aperture. For example, if we open the aperture from f22 to f16, the amount of light entering the camera doubles. Similarly, between f16 and f11, the amount of light doubles too, and so on and so forth. The same principle applies to the shutter speed. If we slow the shutter down from 1,000th of a second to 500th of a second, the amount of light entering the camera doubles, and the same thing happens if we move from 500th to 250th. And the very same principle applies to the ISO.
Any scene, setting or photograph can be expressed as a combination of aperture, shutter speed and ISO. This is called EV or exposure value.
Here is a properly exposed picture. If we were to express the EV or exposure value of this photograph in terms of aperture, shutter speed and ISO, it would be the settings at which this photograph has been shot. So the exposure value of this picture is 5.6 and 1,000th of a second at ISO 100. Now suppose we were to close or stop down the aperture from 5.6 to 8. The photograph would become underexposed by one stop. In order to compensate for this loss of light, we would need to slow down the shutter speed by one stop too, from 1,000th of a second to 500th of a second. What we could have also done, instead of slowing down the shutter by one stop, was to raise the ISO by one stop. That would have gotten the picture back to the proper exposure value. But as you know, raising the ISO degrades the picture quality, and in this bright outdoor photograph, there is really no need to do that. So a setting of f8 and 500th of a second at ISO 100 is a perfectly good place to be. Similarly, if we stop down the aperture further by one more stop to f11, we would have to compensate the shutter speed by one stop to slow it down to 1/250th of a second for more light to come in. If we now open the aperture by one stop, the picture becomes overexposed, and in order to lessen the amount of light coming into the camera, you would increase your shutter speed by one stop to 500th of a second. So in one sense, all the three things, namely aperture, shutter speed and ISO, are interchangeable. So if you increase or decrease one of the values, you have to compensate by increasing or decreasing any one of the other two values or a combination of both. Let's take this original picture for example. If you underexpose this by two stops using the aperture to f11, you could of course slow the shutter speed by two stops and take it to 2/50th of a second. Or otherwise, you could slow the shutter speed by one stop and raise the ISO by one stop, and your photograph would be properly exposed again. These three main settings of an exposure are also sometimes referred to as the exposure triangle. But why should we mess around with all these settings when the camera is telling us the proper exposure?
The answer to this is simple: to have more creative control over your photographs, because aperture and shutter speed do have an effect over how your photographs look. So in the next episode, we're going to take a look at how shutter speed affects photographs and how you can use it to create more creative photographs and pictures. So until then, thank you for watching GMAX Studios, and please subscribe to our channel, leave a comment if you have a question, and until the next episode, take care.